watching this, then they've taken over.
Sometimes you shouldn't compromise when it comes to the classics. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we'll be counting down our top 10 picks for the most disappointing arcade ports of all time. Number 10, Mortal Kombat for the SNES. Kicking off our list is an arcade port that showcased full-second control delay, harder to pull off special moves, and gratuitous censorship. Mortal Kombat was famous for its rapid arcade action, abundance of blood, and dismemberment. So when Nintendo's family-friendly politics turned blood into sweat, gamers flocked to the unneutered Genesis version for the real deal. Number 9, Donkey Kong for the Atari 2600. Everyone knows Donkey Kong as the granddaddy of gaming. Too bad this port was a shell of its arcade counterpart. A casualty of rapid development time and limited hardware, several major concessions were made. Namely, the sound effects were wrong, and Jumpman, aka Mario, wore pajamas while jumping over oatmeal cookies? You think that's bad? Pauline had no limbs, and Donkey Kong became the gingerbread man. Number 8, Street Fighter II Special Championship Edition for the Sega Genesis.
Round 1, fight!
The SNES had Street Fighter II, and Sega gamers wanted in on the action. The only problem was that the Sega Genesis standard controller only had 3 buttons. This meant that you had to press start to toggle the alternate 3 buttons. That is, of course, unless you had the new revamped 6-button gamepad. Having to buy a new accessory after you've purchased the game is hard to justify, especially if the game's meant for 2 players. Number 7, Revolution X for the SNES and Genesis.
Yes! Yes!
This Aerosmith light gun shooter was a phenomenal arcade cabinet. Unfortunately, the console versions became unplayable messes. No, we're not even talking about the unpolished visuals and glitchy audio. It sucked for not supporting light guns, and the gamepad-controlled cursor was way too fast to aim properly. Think that's frustrating? This title only granted players 20 measly credits to make it to the end, and the Genesis version didn't even bother to tell you how many you had left. Number 6, 10-Yard Fight for the NES. That's right, classic sports games are not immune to disappointment either. Even though this football game retained similar graphics to its source, it was broken by a fundamental gameplay change. Namely, the console version added a simultaneous second-player mode that gave the second player full access to all of the computer's cheats. So much for a home field advantage. Number 5, Popeye for the Odyssey 2. There's no denying it. One of the biggest and most frequent disappointments with ports are the graphical downgrades. Fair or not, this transition only had access to 64 bytes of RAM, turning Popeye into a stickman, his nemesis Bluto into another stickman, the spinach cans into green circles, and the staircases into, I don't know, division symbols? On top of all that, the biggest disappointment was the fact that it featured only one playable stage. Number 4, Final Fight for the SNES. This beat-em-up port looked and played phenomenally. However, its sins included removing one of the 3 playable characters and the entire 2-player mode, which was basically the game's star feature. Stage 4's factory level was also deleted, and censorship forced sex changes upon all of the game's female enemies. Number 3, Double Dragon for the Atari 2600. This game's focus on delivering the smackdown to legions of foes made it the true foundation of the beat-em-up genre. However, everything had to be stripped down for the Atari version. While we understand the loss of detail, the real shocker here is that the 3-button control scheme was even attempted on a 1-button system. It didn't even have proper collision detection. Blasphemy. Number 2, Dragon's Lair for the NES. There have been countless ports of this landmark choose-your-own-adventure game. While it was understandable that none of the older home consoles could handle full-motion video, it didn't mean that it should be made into an unplayable platformer. The terrible controls were only the beginning. Centered exclusively on memorization, it was literally impossible to move several steps without dying for no apparent reason. Number 1, Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. This is one of, if not the greatest and most iconic arcade game of all time, due to its simplicity, art style, sound effects, and addictive gameplay. Understandably, Atari wanted in on that action, but gobbled up everything that gamers knew and loved in the process. Dots became wafers, fruits became vitamins, ghosts literally turned invisible, and the Waka Waka sound changed into a cringeworthy, well, just listen. Agree with our list? Which arcade port disappointed you the most? For more great top 10 lists, be sure to subscribe to WatchMojo. Popeye.com.
Looks like you made it. Where you go from here is up to you.